I am pretty shy, especially in front of the camera. You should see how much I fretted just to do this little video, and Ian's so patient with me.
And I just sat there ready.
He's ready to go.
Take me as I am.
There are craftsmen, and then there are artists. And then, very rarely, there are people who exist in a category entirely their own, individuals whose work is so distinctly personal, so unmistakably shaped by the way they see the world, that you would recognize it blindfolded. Ian Roussel of Full Custom Garage was one of those people. A self-taught metal sculptor working alone in the middle of the Mojave Desert, he spent decades turning rusted-out, forgotten vehicles into rolling works of art that collectors from 3 continents paid serious money to own. He built a television show around that process that earned a near-perfect rating on IMDb. He was, by every measure that matters in the world of custom fabrication, a genuine legend. And then he was gone from your screen. No warning. No dramatic farewell episode. Just an absence where a presence used to be. If you were a fan of Full Custom Garage, and there were a lot of you, more than network television ever fully appreciated, that disappearance left a real question hanging in the air. What actually happened to Ian Roussel? The answer, as it turns out, is not a single story. It is a series of blows that landed one after another over a period of years, each one harder than the last. Health. Loss. Grief. The weight of a decade spent working in conditions that no human body was designed to sustain. And underneath all of it, the slow, quiet pressure of being a genuinely private and internally driven person who spent 9 years performing a version of himself for a camera. Put it all together, and you have a story that is more complicated, more human, and more worth understanding than any headline has managed to capture. To understand the collapse, you have to first understand the man. Ian Roussel grew up in Southern California, and from the beginning, the conventional academic path held absolutely nothing for him. He was not the kind of person who learned in classrooms. He learned with his hands. Somewhere in his early years, he discovered that metal, raw, uncooperative, industrial metal, responded to him in a way nothing else did. Not responded in the sense of being easy or cooperative, but responded in the sense that when Ian Roussel touched it with intention, it became something. Something that hadn't existed before. Something that bore no resemblance to anyone else's work. He never went to trade school for it. He never apprenticed under anyone. He simply started making things, kept making things, and kept getting better until the quality of what he produced became undeniable. By the time he was in his 20s, he had established his own custom fabrication operation out in the Mojave Desert, and he was doing it entirely his way, no blueprints, no computer-aided design software, no team of assistants to handle the less glamorous parts of the process. Just Ian, the metal, and whatever was living in his imagination that day. What came out of that shop was genuinely strange, and strange in the best possible way. Not bizarre for the sake of attention. Not provocative for the sake of reaction. But strange in the sense that it bore no resemblance to anything else being built anywhere else. Ian was not a car enthusiast in the conventional sense. He had no particular attachment to horsepower figures or chrome finishes or the cultural signifiers that defined mainstream car culture. What he cared about was form. Shape. The way a surface could curve, the way 2 lines could meet, the way a piece of metal that had started life as industrial scrap could be coaxed into something that looked like it had been designed by someone with a very strange and very disciplined eye. He described his relationship to the work once with a kind of brutal precision, that building these vehicles wasn't about cars at all, but about the addiction of making, of creating shapes. That sentence tells you everything. This was never about automobiles. It was about creation itself. He had a partner in all of this, his wife Jamie, who managed the business operations, handled client communications, and over time became the essential infrastructure behind everything Ian built publicly. Ian could function in a world of pure creation because Jamie handled the world of practical reality. Their partnership was quiet, functional, and absolutely foundational. When MAVTV came along and offered Ian a television show, the network was essentially betting that this strange, solitary, uncompromising craftsman could be translated for a mainstream audience. By all conventional television logic, that bet should have failed spectacularly. Ian Roussel was not a performer. He had no interest in drama. He built punk rock into his workflow, Ministry, The Dead Milkmen, and he described himself without any self-consciousness as a punk rock guy. He was not going to soften anything. He was not going to manufacture conflict for ratings. He was simply going to go to work. Full Custom Garage premiered on MAVTV on March 28, 2014, and it was immediately apparent that something unusual was happening. In an era when car television had hardened into a rigid formula, countdown clocks, artificial deadlines, manufactured crises between builder and client, enormous production teams edited to appear scrappy. Ian Roussel showed up and did the opposite. He worked alone. He narrated his process quietly, in real time, explaining decisions as he made them and acknowledging when something wasn't working. He made mistakes and left them in. He changed direction when a build required it and talked through the recalculation while it was happening. No drama. No performance. Just a craftsman at work, in a corrugated metal building in the desert, with punk rock playing and a dog wandering through the frame. That dog was Dude. And if you watched the show at all, you knew Dude was not a prop or a production decision. He was simply there, the same way Ian was there, the same way the metal and the music were there. He moved through the shop with the unhurried authority of someone who belonged, and viewers, hundreds of thousands of them, adored him for it. MAVTV's own social media team recognized Dude as one of the show's most beloved personalities. He made the whole enterprise feel warmer and more real than television usually manages to feel. Full Custom Garage ran for 9 seasons and earned an IMDb rating of 8.7 out of 10. That number deserves to be said plainly, 8.7. For a show with no manufactured drama, no countdown clocks, no antagonists, no supporting cast engineered for tension. Just one man, in a desert workshop, building things. Collectors in Japan, Germany, and the Netherlands commissioned vehicles from Ian's sight unseen, based on the quality of what they saw him produce on television. Fans drove hours across multiple states just to stand outside the shop in the Mojave and feel some proximity to what they'd been watching. People didn't just watch Full Custom Garage. They studied it. They rewound build sequences to understand how Ian achieved a particular curve or solved a specific structural problem. What those viewers couldn't see, what the camera was inherently incapable of communicating, was the physical reality of the conditions Ian was working in. The Mojave Desert Workshop was not air-conditioned. Desert summers in that region regularly climb well past 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Add to that temperature the radiant heat of active welding equipment, the friction heat of grinding metal, and the stored thermal energy of a corrugated metal building that had been absorbing direct sunlight for hours, and you have an environment that is genuinely hostile to human physiology. Ian Roussel worked in those conditions for 13-hour days. Not occasionally, not during particularly demanding builds. Consistently. For 9 years. The human body is remarkably adaptive, but it has limits that are not negotiable. Sustained exposure to extreme heat over years doesn't just tire a person out. It degrades the function of organs that depend on hydration and temperature regulation to operate correctly. The kidneys, in particular, are vulnerable. And for years, Ian's body was compensating, absorbing the debt, making up the difference through whatever biological stubbornness and physical will he possessed. From the outside, watching from a couch somewhere cool, none of this was visible. The work was magnificent. The light in the desert was beautiful. The man on screen seemed as self-possessed and capable as ever. Then, in late 2022 running into early 2023, Ian Roussel's body stopped compensating. He suffered a serious heat-related collapse with symptoms consistent with heat stroke. The physical consequences included kidney damage, not metaphorical overwork, not fatigue, but actual damage to organs that had been pushed, year over year, past the point where they could recover fully on their own. This was the Mojave presenting Ian with the bill for everything he had borrowed from himself across nearly a decade of television production. The bill came with compound interest. For most people, this would already be enough. But the health collapse didn't arrive in isolation. 7 months before it happened, in May 2022, Dude died of cancer. Ian posted about it publicly and the response from fans was immediate and collective. People didn't respond as if they had lost a television dog. They responded as if they had lost something that had genuinely been present in their lives, because it had been. Dude had been in the shop for years. His presence was woven into the texture of the show in a way that no production decision had engineered. When he was gone, something real was gone with him, and viewers felt that. So consider the timeline. May 2022, Dude dies. Late 2022 into early 2023, Ian suffers a heat stroke that causes kidney damage. 13-hour days across 9 seasons in conditions that were quietly destroying his health the entire time. A television format that required him to perform a version of himself, slightly compressed, slightly shaped for broadcast, rather than the full, unedited version that had actually existed all along. Something had to give. Multiple things gave, essentially simultaneously. The question with a man like Ian Roussel is always, what does he do with it? Does he collapse publicly? Does he rail against the circumstances? Does he demand sympathy? If you know anything about him, You already know the answer to all three of those questions is no. What Ian Roussel did was something far more interesting and far more consistent with who he has always been. He built the door before he needed to walk through it. On January 29, 2023, months before his final television episodes aired, before any public announcement that Full Custom Garage was ending, Ian and Jamie launched the Full Custom Ian YouTube channel. Let that sequence land properly. Before the show was officially over. Before anyone outside his household knew the television era was winding down. Ian had already established the next platform, on his own terms, operating by his own rules. No network. No broadcast schedule. No production requirements that trimmed the thinking out of the building. Episode lengths following the actual pace of the work, whether that meant 18 minutes or over an hour. Mistakes left in. Recalculations shown in full. The things television had been editing out for 9 years were suddenly the whole point. Jamie stepped into the production and editing role she had been growing toward for years, shaping the raw footage with the same directness Ian brought to the metal. The channel grew. Fans who had been following since 2014 described it in the comment sections as finally getting to meet the real Ian, the one that had always existed behind the television packaging. The Instagram account at full_custom_Ian grew past 172,000 followers. Ian appeared at SEMA 2023 alongside Jamie, presenting new work and signing autograph posters, not as a celebrity making a promotional appearance, but as a craftsman showing what he had been building. There is a difference, and Ian has always understood it better than most people in his industry. By late 2023, Ian made the final decision. He was done with television. The last episodes of Full Custom Garage aired in January 2024, a clean, dignified conclusion to 9 seasons, with no public acrimony, no scorched earth statement, no burned bridges. Just a craftsman finishing what he started and putting it down with the same quiet intention he'd brought to everything else. He was not cancelled. He was not pushed out. He chose to leave, on his own schedule, after building his own alternative before anyone could take the choice from him.